So we have a flipped classroom model. We do lecture or discussions during the class. They watch the lectures ahead of time. They do the questions ahead of time. I sometimes will assign small paragraph responses or other things in addition to, or maybe instead of the questions. Sometimes we'll use the questions as a prompt that they are required to know for class, but I'll have them do an in-depth response to one of them as their assignment rather than doing the entire workbook. But it's great to have the workbook as just a jumping off point. I absolutely love the lecture-based curriculum. I think it's far superior to a textbook. I did some textbooks in high school. I think I did Streams of Civilization as a side textbook alongside the great books, and it was valuable. It's not that it's not valuable to have that information, but it didn't shape me anywhere nearly as much as the lectures that I had from Mr. Callahan. And I think the reason for that is that we're not, people are not just reading beings. You know, we are relational beings. There's something about being in person with people. There's something about hearing people's voices and having different personalities. We're not meant to just read text and only interact with that. And so that's one of the things I really love, is actually having a good teacher is really valuable. As a co-op teacher, it makes it very easy that I have the lectures already set up for me. It actually makes my prep time a lot less than if I had to give the lectures as well. And I'm not nearly the expert that Mr. Callahan is. So I have a master's from New St. Andrews College. It's one of the top classical schools in the nation. And yet my depth of knowledge of all the great books is nowhere close to what it is for Mr. Callahan, who spent his entire life doing that. So it's incredibly valuable to have those lectures already recorded. Class time then turns into discussion with the students. I really love that they have the lectures ahead of time and then they do workbook questions, so I don't ever feel like I'm worried about missing something. So class discussion is really about helping them to interact verbally with what they've read and to make connections. Mr. Callahan said once upon a time, I can't even remember when it was, but he talked about the universities and how they used to be about connecting everything, essentially, so the unified nature of that. And that really we kind of have multiversities now, where people are studying different subjects and they're not in conjunction with each other, they're not interacting with each other. In our classes, we might have a class where, I think it was just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about Plato, and it turned into discussion about abortion and homosexuality and the nature of sin, which has to do with contrapasso and all these various, it had to do with Dante and levels of sin, levels of hell, and it was just an interesting connection between all the things. So that's my goal really, is to get the students to interact with everything and to make connections between things. I know different people teach that differently, but that's my personal goal, is to get the students to see that this information is relevant to their world, relevant to other things that they're studying elsewhere, and learn to have good verbal skills in communicating that and interacting in class. As far as textbooks, I do think there's a place for having those here and there. It depends on what your goal is, right? So my goal with the students is to teach them to grow up in wisdom, to teach them to learn how to read and think and articulate well. Reading a textbook is going to give them facts. Some good textbooks might be written well, so they might be reading good literature, but my main goal really isn't to make sure that they remember every single detail or every part of history. They're not going to remember everything. So I don't really miss the textbook at all. There may be a place for it for something else, but with the goal of humanities, it's not. I don't think it's missing the point if you're using a textbook for humanities.